Welcome back to Uncharted 2 again, and it's been a while, actually, since the last time I did a video for this, upload or anything, and ooh, I almost fell off there. Thankfully I made it, but yeah, I got kinda lazy like I usually am during the summer, and you know, I bought a bunch of games actually over the last couple of weeks. See, I have a Wii U, and so I bought Lego City.
Yeah, good luck, pal.
And I also bought some 3DS games. I bought Harvest Moon and Donkey Kong Country Returns. The Harvest Moon is a New Beginning, not the Tale of Two Towns, but I bought Harvest Moon: A New Beginning. So I've been enjoying mostly Lego City, and maybe giving some attention to the other two games that I mentioned. But aside from that, I've also been doing other things as well. So I haven't really had the time, basically, to sit down and do one of these. But we're almost done with it, so maybe I'll get all this out before June is up. But don't expect any uploads during E3 week, probably, because I am going to be so into watching E3 next week. It's going to be crazy. So don't expect any uploads next week. More than likely, it's just not going to happen. I'm just going to be too distracted with E3 and all of that exciting stuff going on, so forget that. I know other people tend to do E3 specific videos, but I don't even know if I can or will. Not because I don't want to, because I would like to, but because I just don't really have the time to sit down to do those videos. And I don't really think I could add much, really, to the table as far as videos go. Because everyone's going to cover the same bases when they talk about Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony at E3. So, yeah, that should be exciting, I guess. But, this chapter is sort of a cool-down period. It's, one of these moments that I mentioned earlier that Uncharted 2 just does so well, is that it breaks up the pacing. The game's pacing just it fluctuates, from combat intensive to combat to combat moment, and then it breaks you up with these couple of chapters here before you get into another combat infested sequence. But Uncharted 3, it's like they hammer you with the slower pace at the beginning, and then once you get to chapter 10, it's just combat infested all the way up until chapter 18, or 17 and 18, where they finally actually have this sort of broken up bit where it's, slow and there's no combat, but that section doesn't last terribly long, whereas this is a little bit more engaging than the desert sequence, because you're climbing through a snowy mountain cave area, and there's a lot more you can do with that than you can with a desert. A desert is so barren, so there's really not a whole lot you can do, and I think that was one of the problems with doing a desert instead of something like, something like an actual mountain, kinda. Not like a snowy mountain, but a regular mountain or something. They could have done some other more interesting area, like maybe even one that's focused on the ocean. They could have had something that focused on the ocean with their swimming mechanics. Excuse me. But anyway, this is about Uncharted 2. I always keep going on this off on a tangent about Uncharted 3. I'm sorry. I just like doing these comparisons and things. It's really interesting. It's really fun to do it. Because it's basically going backwards and looking at why Uncharted 2 was considered so much better than Uncharted 3. And we can always argue, you can argue all day long about how, Uncharted 3 is actually still a good game. It's not a bad game. and etc., etc. But the fact remains that Uncharted 2 is probably still the better game overall, and that's just because of the campaign itself, how they managed to just ace it. And I really feel like the franchise could have ended on 2, and they could have done a new game, and it would have been perfectly fine. People would have been happy with Uncharted 2 being the peak of the franchise. But they had to do a third one, and the third one couldn't match up to what was special about 2. And I always flub that part up when I come back to this game. I always flub that up. I don't know if it's because the angle they put you at initially when the cutscene, like when it first happens, when you try to do it on the first try, it always just screws up for some reason. So that's why I died there, even though it's an easy part and I've done it before, etc., etc. I guess I can't really John about it too much, but yeah, that's my explanation. Is I think it's just because you don't have enough momentum. I think it was the way I climbed onto the rope, so I didn't give myself enough momentum to get it on the first try. Swinging back and forth like that. But yes, what was I thinking of saying here? What was I talking about before I talked about that mistake that I made? Oh, that's right. We were talking about Uncharted 2 and how it is sort of the peak of the franchise. Even though it's the second game, it's essentially the peak. It's the high point of the series. And it's just like what I've said in the other parts while playing this game. It's the pacing. The pacing is the crux. Like, ignoring the gameplay itself, you know, the faults of Uncharted 2 is still a flawed game mechanically. It's not perfect mechanically. It works, yes, but there are some flaws with it that Uncharted 3 did address. But ignoring the gameplay and the actual story plot, like ignoring the plot and everything, the pacing itself is what makes the game. Because you get so absorbed into it so easily, and then, you know, quickly you find yourself in Nepal, and then after Nepal, you're transitioned into the temple, and the temple has no combat until the end of it. And then after the temple, you go in the rain back through Nepal, and you're defending somebody from dying, and then you're running away from them. And then you get to the train sequence, which there's a nice little, you know, quietness there a little bit, getting to the train. There's some combat on the way there, but they're small sections. They're all relatively small combat sections. And then you get to the actual train part where you're almost on the train, and you defend your ass off until Elena gets there. That's actually a pretty large combat sequence. And then you finally get onto the train, which has a bunch of combat sequences. But in reality, if you don't die a whole lot, it doesn't really feel like a lot of combat. It's really, like, you saw me go through the train, both, you know, before it was in the tunnel and after it was in the tunnel. And the combat there's not a whole lot of it. So, the designers knew what they were doing, in that they didn't just give you, you know, waves of enemies in every single spot. It was just a singular set of enemies every so often you had to fight, and that works because they don't overwhelm you at all, and then they throw you into this calm section for like 2 or 3 chapters. I don't even consider what I'm doing here as combat, because you're really just running away and just shooting at them until you can get a certain scripted sequence to occur. And that is you getting attacked in Tenzin, trying to stop him. And you can really keep this up like the whole time. You can keep running away from him as long as you don't get cornered. You can just keep this going and never get caught if you wanted to. But eventually you do want to get caught so that Tenzin can save you. But I don't necessarily consider this part something that breaks up the pace of what this chapter is, because even though it is faster than what you were doing just a moment ago, it's still, how do I put this? It's still it is still kind of relaxing to play in a way. I mean, maybe the first time you're playing it, it is sort of pressuring and stressful, and yeah, they want you to feel that the first time. But after that first time, you go back and replay it, and you're like, oh, this totally fits into what I was just doing a moment ago. It totally breaks up that moment, but it's still, you know, it's not enough to ruin what I was just doing in this chapter. So it's just interesting. And then, you know, then you go against the Guardians again in this latter half coming up, and it also fits the general pacing of this chapter, and it's just, it just works really well. I think, you know, I think people who reviewed this game got too wrapped up in the story and everything, and they praise that the most. And really, the story is, it's good enough. I mean, it's not, I don't think it could win any Oscars or anything like that, like if it was a movie, but it works, and it's, you know, you care about the characters, and that's what matters. But, you know, what makes the story work so well is that the portions that you're actually playing the game are paced so well, like, they're just so perfectly paced. And then when you play Uncharted 3 through, you'll notice right away that the pacing is way off the mark from what compared to Uncharted 2. Like, you will, like, and Uncharted 1 suffers the same problem. It has pacing issues. Granted, that game was the first in the series, so it has excuses, but it has its own pacing problems as well, and that's why it wasn't received as amazingly as this game. And because this game had such a you know, better story than, I guess it's a better story than 1. I don't know. I think they're about the same, but because this game presented a nice storyline between the characters that you cared about, because they had developed those characters in Uncharted 1 decently well enough to craft a interesting story with a love triangle of sorts, and a interesting myth of sorts about, you know, a certain stone that no one had really heard about. They were instantly, you know, they instantly hit gold because they picked something that no one really actually heard about too well. And, you know, everyone's heard of Marco Polo before, so it's something that is, you know, very, it's interesting to the player, because they're like, oh, this is actually sort of history based. I like that, because the first game, while it did have that history in it and everything, it wasn't the whole main focus of it. I mean, it didn't really come into the story again until like the end of the game, practically. But Uncharted 2 just focused a little bit more on it, and that's what sort of made it more special, I guess. Yeah, slightly more special. If there's one thing that I, you know, I can go on and on about this game, really. I don't know why I'm talking about all this right now when I'm not even done with the game, but I mean, I've played it already before, and you wouldn't probably be watching this if you didn't want to hear me talk more about what I think and such. So it's okay. I don't know. Now we're just. This is just a part where I just want to talk about this stuff, because what's going on screen is fairly obvious, right? I'm just climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing, and there's none of that in Uncharted 3. Like, how much of that is there really in Uncharted 3? It's not as much as this. Like, you can go back and look at the chapters in Uncharted 3. How how much of a chapter actually focused on this much climbing and sort of platforming? Not a whole lot. I don't think that the team that was on Uncharted 3 could really think of something as long as chapters 18 and 19 as in this game. This game's chapter 18 and 19 are just really well crafted. I mean, look, they even tried to throw in something that you had to time to jump through, that you could actually die from if you screwed up. There's nothing like that in Uncharted 3. You know, I mean, granted, it's not, you know, that spinning thing isn't hard to time, but it's at least there. You know, there's at least some semblance of trying to make the player good at jumping and, you know, recognizing the time of when to jump and everything. You know,
Sure, Tenzin. Take the easy way.
I could go on and 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 on about this stuff, and I like to. It's fun. But I guess I've been doing it a little bit too much, haven't I? Yeah, I guess so. Now this jump is interesting because when I first played the game, like, just changing subjects here. When I first played this game and I did this, I had no idea what I was aiming for, and so I died a couple of times. But then, when I figured it out, I was like, oh, you know, it was a really, really weird. But I guess like they felt because they had the sunlight lighting on that platform there that you would recognize that's what you're supposed to jump to, which makes sense. Yeah, I mean, this chapter is really fun to play, but it's not really fun to watch. I mean, it's interesting to watch, but it's not fun to watch necessarily, because it's just easy peasy platforming and climbing. I wish Uncharted had more difficult platforming. It really felt like from this part, this sequence, that if it was the same team working on Uncharted 3 instead, maybe they would have advanced the platforming for Uncharted 3. Maybe they would have actually gone through with making platforming a little bit more of a focal point. But alas, instead in Uncharted 3, it was more combat focused in Uncharted 3, to be honest. Granted, they did try to utilize the same general pacing, I guess, as Uncharted 2 as far as combat goes. Like, they didn't throw waves upon waves of enemies at you, but they did have a decent amount of enemies thrown at you, regardless. The chapters, even though they have small platforming sections within them and climbing, there's not a single chapter that is as long as this one that just purely focuses on this really interesting and sort of fun climbing and platforming. It really feels like you're exploring this area, and you get to see all these nice little visual effects and graphics and stuff that they had around. It was pretty fun at the time. Maybe they just, you know, they couldn't think of anything with the desert, like I said, because the desert is barren and there's nothing interesting to look at. Or they ran out of time and they couldn't think of how to extend the desert without just padding it with mirages, which I think would have been fun. I think having mirages, opening the desert up a little more, and allowing the player to explore the desert would have been interesting, but they just decided to keep it linear as heck and make it so that any direction you went would basically put you the right way, which is just stupid. But that's how they handled it. That's how they chose to handle it. So, can't really say much more about that, I guess. If only this part wasn't so slow. I mean, I like the pacing, like I said, when I'm playing it, but as I'm watching it here right now, man, is it slow. And I wish I could have done the airwalk glitch to speed this up a little bit, but that was patched out for the single player, and I had the patch when I was playing this game, and I didn't delete the patch or anything, because I have DLC for this game that I don't want to have to re-download if I ever choose to play the multiplayer again. Which I doubt I will, because I have Uncharted 3, which Uncharted 3's multiplayer is fundamentally at its core better than Uncharted 2, but that's not saying a whole lot. And right here I make the stupidest jump ever. I just totally botch it for some reason. I had the complete wrong angle when I was running, and I literally facepalmed when that happened. I was like, oh my god, how did I do that? I feel so terrible. So yeah, that's another botch right there for the for this chapter, but that's okay, because we're coming to an end here with this, thank God, because talking about this is so hard, like, just trying to think of something to talk about during all of this slow, general pacing of this part. But like I said, I like it. I like it when I'm playing it. When I'm watching it, it's not as fun. And I'm sure that's the way it is going to be for you guys, is that it's not as fun to watch this or anything like that, because it's just me walking through and climbing and jumping and etc. etc. The combat stuff is way more interesting and fun to commentate for me and go over and watch in general and stuff, and that's just what I like to do, you know? You know, doing this, you know, it's like me commentating a multiplayer match, sort of, but not really. So now we come to the cutscene here, and yeah, this cutscene was kind of nice to see the first time. I liked it. I always like this cutscene for some reason. I think it's just because of the being able to see Drake breathing, you know, the air and then the cold air, and the revelation of this being like the Nazis or whatever, etc., etc. It's really great.
Chintamani stone.
It's really, really great.
Huh. More resin. Hello. Would you look at this?
I mean, I like it.
These men were all shot. Oh, that's the Irman Sul. It's the life tree. Honor Nerbe. Oh, Jesus. They were SS. Nazis.
Nazi?
What would a man become? Tenzin, Schaefer did this.
Ah,
Schaefer killed them.
Mare.
Yes. It's the only way to stop them.
Sure.
Shit. We have to find a way out of here. Now.
Alright, so this part is what's really interesting. This is the interesting part about this chapter.
Hey,
the Guardians show up, right? And you're supposed to... What people commonly do is when they're faced with this the first time is they actually try to sort of combat the Guardians instead of just surviving. You're really just supposed to survive, and almost always one of the Guardians goes for one of the globes or whatever, one of the planets that the statues are holding, the spherical object on the left side. It's usually the left side is what they go for, and they throw it at you. So I choose to go to this side and just run from this side to the other side to avoid ever getting close to them at all, and also to watch out for the sphere being thrown. And see, there goes one of them that was thrown, like I said. And I think another one gets tossed, yeah. And they always toss them at the same angle, so they don't even really exactly toss them at you. It's just sort of where they think you're gonna be, like I guess the programmers just said the player's instincts might point them to just like be, you know, on that bottom floor in that corner there. And so then you just wait for the platform to drop all the way down, and here you go. I mean, first time you're playing this, you might die, probably. You will probably die once or twice. If you don't know that's what you're waiting for, and you're supposed to just be on the second floor there, technically speaking. So, yeah. And for some reason, the lip syncing is off here. I don't know why. That's just really strange to me. But, yeah. That's pretty much the end of this chapter, I believe. I almost got hit at the end there, but I don't think it's possible to get hit the second time if you just keep tapping R1 and whatnot, so that's good. That's the end of this chapter, though, guys, so we'll continue another time. Hopefully I'll have another one out before E3. If not, then I will see you after E3, more than likely, with the next Uncharted 2 video. Until then, see ya.
Versos. Bema.
Thank God.
Oh, Nate.
What happened?
It's Lazarevich. They found us.
Bema kawa.
I don't know. I don't know. Schaefer's got her.
Kare.
Mol Schaefer and Yum Dudu.
Schaefer.
They went the other way.
All right.
Nate, this is our fault. We did this.
Just stay here. We keep them safe. Come on.